If God is all-powerful, why are children born with incurable diseases? If God is good, why do earthquakes swallow entire cities without warning? And if he can do anything and wants what is good, why has suffering existed in every corner of this planet since the dawn of time? The answer is not where you think it is, and we are about to get there right now. This set of questions has a name. It is called the paradox of Epicurus, and it is over 2,000 years old. The Greek philosopher laid out a line of reasoning that no one to this day has been able to dismantle in simple terms. If God can end suffering and does not, he is not good. If he wants to end it and cannot, he is not all-powerful. If he neither can nor wants to, then why call him God? We tend to ask this question while staring at the sky after a funeral, or lying awake in the dead of night after news that shatters everything. And the answer that comes is usually silence, or some vague line about faith that convinces no one. But we decided to do things differently. We took the emotion off the table and replaced it with something that feels no pity, does not pray, and does not pick sides. We gathered every available record of human history, accounts of catastrophes, medical data, religious texts, war statistics, and natural disaster reports, and fed it all into an analytical artificial intelligence called Axiom. It does not believe in anything, and it does not deny anything. It calculates, and we asked it to answer the hardest question humanity has ever posed. Is evil a flaw in the world, or is it the piece that holds everything together? Before looking for meaning in suffering, we needed to measure the size of it, to face the numbers head-on. And we started with the 20th century, the period when humanity pushed its capacity for destruction to the most extreme limit ever seen. We asked the analysis to chart violent deaths between 1901 and the year 2000. The shape that appeared looked like the heartbeat of someone dying. The First World War killed roughly 20 million people. The Second took between 70 and 85 million. But those are not just numbers. 85 million dead in 6 years means that during every single second of that period, a human life was being extinguished somewhere on the planet, and the machine went further. We fed it medical descriptions of what war does to the body: shrapnel wounds, radiation burns in Hiroshima, the effects of starvation during the siege of Leningrad. Neuroscience has already demonstrated that the brain processes physical pain and emotional pain using overlapping circuits. In other words, losing a child activates brain regions similar to those triggered by a severe burn. We asked the artificial intelligence to convert the total volume of 20th century human suffering into units of neural activity. If it were possible to turn the electrical impulses generated by the pain of all those people into energy, it would be enough to power a city the size of New York for 50 years. We live in a reality drenched in pain on a scale the human mind cannot visualize. But war is a human affair. A person can look at these numbers and say the blame is ours, not God's. We have free will, we choose to kill one another, and the Creator has nothing to do with it. That is a strong argument, so we accepted it and changed the filter. We asked Axiom to remove everything caused by human beings: wars, genocides, attacks, torture, all of it gone. And we asked it to show only what was left, what theologians call natural evil, the kind of suffering that has no human culprit, diseases that come written in the blood, earthquakes, tsunamis, epidemics. If God exists, this is the part that falls on his account, and what was left was not small. Even after stripping every shred of human wickedness from the equation, the planet remains a machine that generates pain on an industrial scale. Nobody designed this badly by accident. Suffering is stitched into the very laws that make the world run, from biology to geology, from genetics to climate. Historians who spent years investigating this question reached a similar conclusion. The problem of suffering has no easy solution because it is not an anomaly. It is the system operating exactly as it was built. And that is when we realized the investigation had barely begun. If the suffering caused by people was already immense, the suffering that nobody caused was even more disturbing, because there was no defendant to blame. All that was left was to look at the structure of the world itself and ask why it was made this way. And that was exactly what Axiom would process next, starting with one of the darkest periods in the history of humanity, when an invisible bacterium, without consciousness and without malice, wiped out half of Europe in just a few years. We went back in time to the middle of the 14th century and loaded into Axiom the records of the spread of Yersinia pestis, the bacterium behind the Black Death. A microscopic organism without a brain, without will, without any notion of what it was doing, killed between 30 and 60% of Europe's entire population. Think about what that means in practice. Out of every 2 people you know, 1 would have died covered in dark swellings, burning with fever, coughing up blood in a matter of days. The churches were piled with bodies, priests and thieves alike. The disease made no distinction between those who prayed and those who stole. Prayer did not work as a shield, and the temples became storehouses for the dead. Axiom examined this scenario with a coldness that is hard to stomach. From a biological standpoint, the plague bacterium is an organism just as finely designed as the human being. The bacterium has no malice. It simply tries to multiply like every living thing. The conflict between its interests and ours resulted in the deaths of tens of millions of people. If God created this bacterium, what is it for? That is a question no simple religious answer can resolve, and medical historians estimate the Black Death may have killed up to 200 million people over the course of its multiple waves. A single microscopic species caused more deaths than any dictator in history. But we did not stop at the Black Death. We moved on to the 1st of November, 1755, Lisbon, Portugal, All Saints' Day. At 9:40 in the morning, with the churches packed with worshippers, the ground split open. The Great Lisbon earthquake killed up to 100,000 people. Those who survived the collapse ran toward the sea, where a massive tsunami swallowed them, and those who escaped the water were caught by a fire that burned through the city for 5 days. The analysis cross-referenced the religiosity of the population with the location of the epicenter. The more devout the area, the stronger the impact. One of the greatest thinkers of the era wrote an entire poem about it, asking what sin a baby crushed in its mother's arms could have possibly committed. And when Axiom analyzed the structure of the tectonic plates beneath Lisbon, the result was chilling. The movement of those plates is what keeps the carbon cycle and the planet's magnetic field running. Without that movement, the Earth would become a dead planet like Mars. No atmosphere, no protection from radiation, no life. The death of 100,000 people in Lisbon was a side effect of the mechanism that keeps the planet alive. Decades of study on plate tectonics confirm this very logic. The forces that destroy cities are the same forces that make life on the surface possible. It sounds brutal, and it is, but it was the first clear pattern to emerge from the analysis. Suffering is built into the laws that make the world work. And when we looked at the animal kingdom, it got worse. Theologians often speak of the harmony of nature, of a lost paradise where everything functioned in balance. Axiom scoured fossil records and the history of evolution and returned a completely different portrait. The history of life on this planet is a history of relentless predation. More than 99% of all species that have ever existed are extinct, most of them through violent death, predators, parasites, or competition for resources. A gazelle being devoured alive by a lion feels the same pain a human being would, because the nervous system works the same way. Biology describes nature as a place of indifferent suffering on a colossal scale, and the records confirm it. If there is a creator who designed this world, he placed at its very center a clear principle. Life only exists at the cost of another life's death. We then posed the most direct question possible to Axiom. Is there any model of biological life where suffering is not necessary? Axiom ran millions of simulations, worlds where creatures feed only on sunlight, where there are no nerve endings to transmit pain, where nobody dies of old age. And every single one of those simulations failed. Without pain, an organism cannot recognize danger and destroys itself. Without death, the population exhausts its resources and collapses entirely. Without competition, evolution halts, and any external change wipes out the entire biosphere at once. Suffering is part of the design. It always has been, and that conclusion raised an even deeper question. Because if biology depends on pain to function, what about the laws of physics that underpin everything beneath it? What happens when we look at the most fundamental level of reality and ask why destroying is so easy, while building demands so much effort? We loaded the physical constants of the universe into Axiom and requested an analysis of the most fundamental phenomenon in material reality, the second law of thermodynamics. In simple terms, this law says that in any closed system, disorder always increases. Always. A hot cup of coffee sitting on a table will cool down because the heat spreads into the room, and never under any circumstances will the heat from the room gather itself back into the cup to warm the coffee again. A glass falls to the floor and shatters into hundreds of pieces, and even if you wait billions of years, those pieces will never leap off the ground and reassemble themselves into a glass. One of the greatest physicists of the 20th century said that if your favorite theory contradicts the second law of thermodynamics, there is no hope for it. This law is unbreakable, and what it means for our investigation is devastating. The entire universe is a process of continuous deterioration. Time is a river that flows in one direction only, toward disorder. Every star, every molecule, every cell in your body is marching toward a state of maximum rest, which is just another name for total chaos, for death. Order is the exception. Order is something that requires enormous effort to create and no effort at all to destroy. Building a house takes years of labor, hundreds of workers, tons of material. Reducing it to ashes takes a single spark and a few hours. Building trust between two people takes decades of living side by side. Destroying that trust takes a single sentence spoken at the wrong moment. We asked Axiom to calculate what we called the coefficient of destruction, using the Twin Towers in New York as an example. On one side, all the energy invested in construction, mining the ore, producing the steel, engineering the designs, training the architects, manufacturing the concrete, millions of hours of human labor. On the other side, the energy it took to destroy it all. The kinetic energy of two planes and the chemical energy of their fuel. The ratio between creation and destruction was thousands to one. Ending a human life takes just a few grams of metal traveling at high speed. Creating that same life required years of care, tons of food, and a quantity of love no formula can measure. Destroying costs less energy than building. It has always been that way. Axiom put it in a way that stayed etched in the analysis. Destruction is the gravity of the world. Everything falls on its own. Rising is what takes strength. If God created this world, why did he make good so hard and evil so easy? We fed the question to Axiom, which simulated a universe without entropy, a place where nothing breaks, where bodies do not age, where energy does not dissipate. The result was a frozen image. Without entropy, there are no chemical reactions, because every reaction involves the exchange of energy and a change of state. Without entropy, there is no digestion, no thought, because neurons need to spend energy to function. Without entropy, time stops. Past and future become the same thing. The verdict was clear. A universe with zero entropy is a static structure where life cannot exist. Entropy is the price we pay for anything to happen at all. In relationships between people, it works the same way. Axiom analyzed the flow of information across social media over the past decade, and the numbers confirmed research published by one of the world's leading universities in 2018. False news and panic spread 6 times faster than verified facts. The reason is simple. Truth is complex, nuanced, demands context and mental energy. Lies are emotional, appeal to instinct, and require no effort whatsoever. The human brain was shaped by evolution to conserve calories, including in thinking. And that is why accepting a simple lie is always easier than processing a complicated truth. Ignorance defeats knowledge without breaking a sweat, unless someone makes a constant effort to push back. Pulling all of this together, the analysis revealed something nobody expected. Biology runs on pain, physics runs on deterioration, and human relationships run on constant friction against the natural drift toward chaos. The entire universe is a slope where everything slides downward, and every act of building, every gesture of kindness, every moment of order is a victory against the most basic laws of reality. But this opened a question Axiom could not ignore. If everything marches toward disorder, if entropy is unbeatable inside a closed system, is there a way out? Is there some force capable of reversing this march? And if there is, what would it tell us about the nature of evil itself, and about the value of everything we have built in spite of it? But if the universe is this slope where everything slides toward disorder, then anything that climbs that slope has value. Axiom turned to information theory to explain this. Which is worth more, a handful of sand in the desert or a microchip? Both are made of silicon. The difference is that the microchip is organized silicon with information and energy invested in it. The sand is matter thrown there any which way. The microchip is that same matter arranged with precision. And organization is only worth something because it is hard. If goodness were the natural state of things, as automatic as breathing, nobody would even notice it existed. We value loyalty because betrayal is easier. We value honesty because lying takes less effort. We value peace because conflict ignites on its own. The scarcity of order is what gives goodness its price. We asked Axiom to simulate a society where entropy worked in reverse, a world where order springs from chaos on its own. You throw garbage on the ground, and it turns into a sculpture. You insult someone, and the friendship between you grows stronger. You skip studying, and knowledge appears in your head by itself. In that world, the concept of achievement does not exist. The concept of effort does not exist. The concept of merit vanishes. Nobody feels pride in anything because nothing ever required dedication. Axiom concluded that a world like that produces no meaning whatsoever. It is an environment for creatures without will, without identity, without a story. A fishbowl where nothing grows because nothing needs to fight to exist. But the analysis also revealed the dark side of that logic. Evil accumulates. A small lie opens the door for a bigger one. An injustice left unanswered triggers a chain reaction of revenge. Axiom identified this phenomenon as the avalanche effect, and it manifests not only in the lives of individuals, but in the lives of entire civilizations. Rome fell, Byzantium fell. Every structure that has a beginning is heading toward an end, because social entropy eats away at the foundations from within, slowly, until the weight of accumulated disorder brings it all crashing down at once. Historians who study the collapse of civilizations reached a conclusion that lines up with what Axiom found. Civilizations do not fall because of a single event. They fall because the complexity that sustains them generates ever-rising costs that, at some point, become unsustainable. It is social entropy in slow motion. We then asked the most important question of the entire investigation so far. Is there any way to beat entropy? From the standpoint of pure physics, no. The second law of thermodynamics grants no exceptions. Inside a closed system, disorder always wins. But Axiom highlighted one word that changes everything: closed. Entropy only grows inevitably inside a closed system. If the system is open, if it receives energy from outside, order can grow indefinitely. The Earth is the proof. Our planet receives energy from the sun, and that is why life developed here, instead of matter simply decomposing into dust the way it does on Mars. Life is a rebellion against physics, funded by an external source of energy. And when Axiom analyzed religious texts through this lens, a pattern emerged that cuts across every tradition. In Christianity, they call it grace. In Hinduism, prana. In Chinese traditions, qi. In Christian churches, the Holy Spirit. All of them speak of a force that enters the world from outside and sustains existence. If God is that external source, then prayer, meditation, and even the creative act are ways of connecting the system to its source of energy, ways of receiving fuel for the fight against disorder. Scientists who are also theologians argue that the idea of a universe open to a transcendent source does not contradict physics, but rather complements what physics alone cannot explain. Without that connection, any soul wears down. Any moral code deteriorates. Any love grows cold. Evil, read this way, is the state of someone who has disconnected from the source, running in isolation until the energy runs out and the whole structure collapses. But even accepting that possibility, one thing remained unbearable. Formulas do not heal anyone's heart. You can explain entropy with equations, understand pain as a biological mechanism, accept that physics needs disorder to function. None of that resolves what happens inside a person when the chaos does not hit a graph but hits their life, when it is not a building that collapses but their marriage, when it is not a statistic that dies but someone they love. It was time to change the scale. To step away from the billions and enter the tragedy of a single human being, the oldest and most thoroughly documented case of someone who had everything and lost everything in a single day, and who sat in the wreckage of his own life to ask God the very same question we had been asking. Why? We loaded into Axiom the oldest and most brutal record of a psychological trial that has ever existed, the Book of Job. To Axiom, it was an extreme stress protocol, a report on what happens to the human mind when pressure exceeds every bearable limit. The initial data painted a man named Job, a resident of the land of Uz, with a social standing equivalent to a millionaire of his time. 7,000 head of livestock, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 7 sons and 3 daughters. A moral reputation beyond reproach. And then the test began. In a single day, messengers arrived one after another. They stole the oxen and killed the servants. Fire fell from the sky and burned the sheep. The camels were taken. And finally, a windstorm brought down the house where all 10 children had gathered, 10 coffins on the same day. The psychology of trauma explains that when destruction reaches this level, the brain enters a state where reality stops making sense. But Job did something unexpected. He tore his robes, shaved his head, and spoke words that have echoed across the ages. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. To Axiom, that was not submission. It was the recognition of a fact. Everything in this world is temporary, we own nothing. But the test was not over. After losing everything, Job lost his own health. His body was covered in sores from head to foot. He sat among the ashes, scraping the scabs with a piece of broken pottery. His wife said what anyone would say at the breaking point: "Curse God and die." His friends came, sat in silence for 7 days, and when they finally opened their mouths, it was even worse. "You must have done something wrong. God is just, so if you are suffering, you deserve it." Axiom identified in that argument a mental trap that psychology knows well. We tend to believe that bad things only happen to those who deserve them. It is the mind protecting itself, because if the blame falls on Job, then we are safe. But Job knew he had done nothing to justify any of it. He cried out to the heavens and demanded an explanation. And God was silent. And when God finally answered, he said nothing anyone expected. He did not explain the reason. He did not mention the test. He did not apologize. Instead, he took Job on a kind of tour of the universe. "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Have you ever commanded the morning? Can you catch Leviathan with a fishhook?" God showed Job the scale of creation: stars, abysses, creatures, forces beyond the reach of the human mind. And Job, even though nothing in his situation had changed, with his body still covered in sores and his children still dead, said something that changed everything. "I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes have seen you." His circumstances were the same, but something inside him had changed in scale. Job walked through the worst of it and came out different. Modern psychology has a name for this: post-traumatic growth. Psychology is well acquainted with the stress disorder that breaks a person apart. But there is the opposite phenomenon, studied for decades, in which someone emerges from deep trauma more profound and stronger than they were before. Axiom processed thousands of cases and found a pattern. Those who walked through the worst and did not lose themselves show levels of compassion and resilience that are unreachable for anyone who has lived a life of comfort. And that led us to a famous experiment from the 1960s called Universe 25. A scientist built a paradise for mice: unlimited food, ideal temperature, 0 predators. At first, everything flourished. Then, once the struggle for survival disappeared, every social role collapsed. The males stopped defending territory. The females abandoned their young. The entire colony went extinct inside a perfect paradise. Absolute comfort produced absolute death. There is a name for this principle: anti-fragility. Some things break under the blow, some things withstand it, and some things grow stronger because of the blow. Muscles, the immune system, and the human soul. Without the blow, there is no growth. Without the fire, there is no steel. And that truth still left an open wound. Because Job survived. But what about those who do not? What about the child who dies of leukemia at 5 years old, with no time to grow, no time to understand? If life is only what happens between birth and death, then in those cases there is no justification. Unless life does not end where we think it ends. We fed a simple comparison into Axiom, and it reorganized everything. Someone buys a ticket for what they believe is a luxury cruise. They expect a lounge chair, a pool, cocktails, and a polite waiter. But on the first day they are woken at 4 in the morning by a siren, forced to run across the deck in a storm, scrub the floor, and learn to navigate by the stars. The outrage makes perfect sense if that is a cruise. But what if it is not? What if it is a warship heading into battle, or a naval academy training captains? In that case, the grueling training is not bad service. It is the only program that works. Axiom analyzed the structure of our reality and reached a straightforward verdict. Planet Earth does not match the parameters of a resort. The probability that the purpose of creation was human happiness, in the sense of comfort and pleasure, is 0. If God wanted to make a world where we were simply happy, satisfied, and at ease, he would be the worst engineer in the universe, because the world is full of mosquitoes, viruses, earthquakes, and death. But if God is a competent engineer, then we are the ones who got the purpose of the machine wrong. The machine was not made to deliver comfort, it was made to make us grow. And that idea grew even stronger when Axiom modeled the process of biological birth. Being born is blood, screaming, and the risk of death for both the mother and the child. The baby is expelled from a warm, dark, safe environment into a cold, loud, and hostile world. If the fetus could think, it would say the world is ending, that the walls are closing in, that someone is trying to destroy it. But we, standing on the outside, know that is not destruction. It is birth. The contractions are part of the journey. It is the only way to reach the other side. The Apostle Paul wrote 2,000 years ago that all of creation groans and labors in pain until now, awaiting the moment of its deliverance. Perhaps we are not dying. Perhaps we are being born. And birth is never painless. But why such a hard path? Why not create souls that are ready, mature, complete from the very first moment? Axiom's answer was categorical. You cannot manufacture a personality from nothing. It must be lived, built, piece by piece. God can create a stone. He can create a star. He can create a mechanism that obeys orders. But he cannot create a being that loves freely and consciously just by snapping his fingers, because love is a story, wisdom is lived experience, and courage is having faced fear and chosen to keep going anyway. You cannot implant the memory of a battle you never fought. That would be a false memory. To become someone, you have to walk the path. One of the most celebrated writers of the 20th century lost his wife to cancer and wrote one of the most honest accounts of grief and faith ever put on paper. His conclusion aligns with what Axiom found. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. Pain is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And in this, Axiom identified what it called the law of spiritual thermodynamics. Pain expands the capacity of the soul. A soul that has never suffered is like a small vessel. It can hold only a drop of joy. Pour in any more and it overflows and is lost. People who have endured the worst trials and did not break carry within them a space that simply does not exist in those who have spent their entire lives sheltered. Suffering digs deep, and it is in that depth that true joy finds a place to settle. The steel does not ask the blacksmith why it is being thrown into the fire, why it is being struck by the hammer, why it is being plunged into freezing water. The steel does not understand the process, but the blacksmith does. He is making a sword. And with that, Axiom stopped. The analysis was complete. On the screen appeared the final statement. If eternity exists and free will is real, no suffering is wasted. The charge of injustice does not hold. The world works the way it was designed to work. What is happening is that eternal beings are being shaped from flesh and bone. Back at the beginning, we opened with the paradox of Epicurus. If God can do anything and wants what is good, why does suffering exist? Now the answer is on the table. Pain is not a mistake, death is not a dead end, and God is not an indifferent observer. What is happening is bigger than any one of us can see from the inside. And every time life hurts, what is happening is that the potter's hands are on the clay shaping it. In this very moment, you are growing. What you should fear is not the fire. What you should fear is passing through your entire life and reaching the end with nothing to place on the scale. Everything else is scenery, and your pain, if you let it, can become your greatest achievement. If you like this investigation, subscribing to the channel helps us expand the Axiom Investigation Project. We would love to read your thoughts on the video's subject in the comments and your suggestion for the next topic to be covered. Tell us which city you are watching from. Thank you for staying with us until the end.